The camera fades in on a nation at a crossroads. The air is thick with tension, the kind that lingers when power shifts hands and decisions are made behind closed doors. News anchors speak in urgent tones, political analysts argue across split screens, and everyday Americans scroll through their phones, trying to make sense of it all. Then, a familiar face appears, Eddie Glaude, a scholar known for his sharp insights and unfiltered honesty. His voice, steady but passionate, cuts through the noise. This is an Imperial Presidency on steroids. It's not just a statement, it's a warning. Rewind just a few hours, and the scene is set in the White House. Cameras flash, pens glide across paper, and with the stroke of a signature, a new executive order is born. Then another, and another. Each one carrying the weight of policies that can reshape lives, shift power, and redefine the limits of the presidency. The man behind the desk, former President Donald Trump, signs with a confident, almost defiant flourish. His supporters cheer, calling it bold leadership. His critics watch in alarm, calling it something else entirely, overreach. Executive orders have long been a tool of the presidency, a way for leaders to bypass the slow-moving gears of Congress and take direct action. But something about this moment feels different. The pace, the scale, the sheer force of it all. It's not just governing, it's governing with an iron grip. Eddie Glaude is no stranger to history. He's studied presidencies, revolutions, and the fragile balance of democracy. But even he seems unsettled. We've seen power consolidated before, he says, his gaze steady. But what happens when that power is wielded without limits? The question lingers, heavy in the air. Across the country, some feel reassured. They see a president who refuses to be slowed down, who pushes forward no matter the resistance. Others feel uneasy, sensing the echoes of history, when leaders stretched the rules until they snapped. And then there's the unknown, the part of the story still unfolding. What happens next? How far can executive power go before the checks and balances meant to contain it begin to crack? As the screen fades to black, one thing is clear. This isn't just about policy or politics. It's about power, who holds it, how they use it, and what it means for the future of democracy. And as Eddie Glaude's words replay in your mind, the question remains, is this just strong leadership? Or are we witnessing something far more dangerous? In the days that follow, the country feels like it's holding its breath. News cycles churn out story after story, headlines flashing bold and urgent. Each new executive order fuels the debate. Some celebrate the swift action, others sound the alarm. But one thing is undeniable. Power is being exercised in a way that feels different. In Washington, behind the grand columns and polished floors, lawmakers scramble to respond. Some call it decisive leadership, proof that Washington's usual gridlock can be broken. Others see something more unsettling, a shift toward unchecked authority. The words Imperial Presidency start making their rounds, not just among political analysts but in everyday conversations. People ask, how much power is too much? Where is the line? And has it already been crossed? Eddie Glaude watches all of this unfold with a historian's perspective and a citizen's concern. He's seen what happens when power moves too fast, when democratic guardrails bend under the weight of a single leader's will. The history books are full of moments like this, times when institutions were tested, when leaders pushed boundaries, and when the people had to decide whether to push back or fall in line. But history isn't just something to study. It's something that shapes the present, and right now, the echoes of the past feel louder than ever. Across the country, in living rooms and coffee shops, on talk shows and social media feeds, the debate grows louder. Some argue that Trump is simply doing what he was elected to do, acting decisively, refusing to be bogged down by bureaucracy. They point to past presidents who used executive orders aggressively, arguing that this is nothing new. Others push back, saying this moment feels different. The pace, the scope, the sheer force of these actions, it all raises uneasy questions. And then there's the bigger question, the one lurking beneath every discussion. Asterisk what happens when a leader realizes they can act without limits asterisk. It's not just a hypothetical. It's something history has shown time and again. The expansion of executive power isn't always sudden. Sometimes it creeps in, step by step, order by order. And by the time people realize what's happened, the balance has already shifted. Glaude, with his deep understanding of history and democracy, knows this all too well. He watches as the conversation unfolds, as people choose sides, as lines are drawn. And he wonders, what does this moment mean for the country's future? Meanwhile, inside the White House, the mood is triumphant. Trump and his closest advisors see the backlash not as a warning, but as proof that they are on the right track. The establishment is panicking, one advisor says with a smirk, watching the news play out. That means we're doing something right. To them, the pushback is just noise, part of the game. They believe the people who support Trump don't care about process or precedent. They care about results. And as long as those results keep coming, the methods don't matter. But outside the walls of power, in the homes of everyday Americans, the conversation isn't so simple. People wrestle with conflicting emotions, relief that action is being taken, fear about what that action means for democracy, uncertainty about what the future holds. And then another executive order is signed. Another shockwave ripples through the country. Some celebrate, others protest, and Eddie Glaude, watching it all unfold, knows one thing for certain. This isn't just about one presidency. This is about the soul of American democracy. And right now, that soul is being tested like never before. The divide in the country deepens with each passing day. The executive orders keep coming, reshaping policies with the stroke of a pen. For Trump's supporters, this is exactly why they backed him. Someone who wouldn't hesitate, wouldn't ask for permission, wouldn't let bureaucracy slow him down. But for his critics, this isn't just about policy, it's about power. About how easily it can be concentrated in one person's hands. Eddie Glaude watches all of this unfold with a sense of urgency. He knows this pattern. He's studied it. Power doesn't announce itself as dangerous. It builds quietly, order by order, decision by decision, until one day, people wake up and realize the system they thought they understood has changed. The warning signs are always there, but history has shown that people don't always see them in time. In Congress, the tension is impossible to ignore. Some lawmakers rally behind Trump, praising him for cutting through the red tape and taking control. This is what leadership looks like, one senator declares, standing in front of reporters. But others see a darker side. They argue that this isn't just about pushing policies forward, it's about rewriting the rules of governance itself. This isn't how democracy is supposed to work, a congresswoman warns. No president should have this much unchecked power. Meanwhile, inside the White House, the mood is anything but cautious. Trump, energized by the backlash, sees it as proof that he's winning. His advisors feed into that confidence, reassuring him that the critics are just the usual Washington elites who fear change. Let them talk, one aide says. They can't stop you. But outside of Washington, the reaction isn't so predictable. Across the country, people are trying to make sense of what's happening. Some are relieved, seeing a president who refuses to bow to the system. Others feel uneasy, sensing that something fundamental is shifting. The conversations aren't just happening in newsrooms and government buildings. They're happening around dinner tables, in workplaces, on social media. In a small town in Ohio, a lifelong Republican voter finds himself conflicted. He supported Trump, believed in the promise to shake up Washington. But now, watching the speed and scale of these executive orders, he wonders, asterisk, is this still about draining the swamp? Or is this about something else? Asterisk. In New York, a group of young activists meets in a cramped apartment, planning their next move. They see the executive orders as more than just policy changes. To them, this is about a shift in democracy itself, about a government that no longer feels accountable to the people. We can't just sit back and watch this happen, one of them says. If we do, it'll be too late. Eddie Glaude steps back, watching the country try to make sense of itself again. The sense of urgency that had driven him through those tense months is still there, but now it comes with a quiet understanding. This was never just about Trump. It was about the vulnerabilities in the system, the deep fractures that had been exposed. He knows that removing one man from power doesn't erase the forces that allowed him to push the boundaries so far in the first place. Across the country, life resumes in small ways. The protests slow, the headlines shift, but the conversations don't stop. People are still trying to figure out what this moment meant. Some want to move on, to leave the chaos behind, to pretend things can return to normal. Others know that normal is gone, but something has changed in the way the country sees itself. Inside Washington, the political landscape is being rewritten. Some figures who once stood by Trump now attempt to rebrand themselves, distancing their legacies from the wreckage. Others double down, refusing to accept how it all played out. Investigations continue, but they no longer hold the same urgency. The power that once felt unstoppable has been diffused, not by a single action, but by a series of failures, by a moment when too many people finally saw the truth at the same time. For Trump himself, the final days of his influence are marked by defiance. He refuses to admit defeat, refuses to acknowledge the turning point. His loyalists still believe, still wait for the moment when he will rise again. But power, once lost, is not easily regained. The machine that once seemed to run solely on his will no longer operates the same way. And yet, even with him gone, the impact of his presidency lingers. The precedent of executive power, the blurred lines of democracy, the ability to push past norms, these things do not disappear overnight. Future leaders, regardless of party, will remember what was possible. The system has been tested, and though it may have survived, it has also been reshaped. Eddie Glaude thinks about history, about the patterns that repeat. He knows that this isn't an ending, not really. It's just another chapter in a much longer story, one that doesn't end with a single presidency. The real challenge isn't just recovering from this moment, it's learning from it. It's recognizing how fragile democracy is, how easily it can be stretched, manipulated, reshaped in ways that are hard to undo. As the news cycle moves on, as life settles into whatever comes next, the country stands at a crossroads. It can choose to forget, to pretend this was just another political fight, another moment of division that will eventually smooth itself out. Or it can choose to remember, to ask the hard questions, to hold power accountable, to refuse to let history slip into repetition. Because if there's one thing history has taught, it's that nothing is ever truly over. The struggle for democracy, for truth, for balance, is never won in a single moment. It's an ongoing fight, one that demands vigilance, awareness, and the willingness to stand up before it's too late. And as the country takes its next steps, uncertain but moving forward, one truth remains clear. Democracy is only as strong as the people who are willing to defend it. Eddie Glaude sees it for what it is, a moment that history will mark as a turning point. He watches as even some of Trump's most loyal allies hesitate, their voices quieter, their statements more cautious. They still support him, but now there's an edge of uncertainty. Not because they disagree with the order itself, but because they're realizing something crucial. Power like this, once unleashed, doesn't go back into its cage so easily. But before that hesitation can turn into real opposition, something else happens. A second shockwave. Another move that no one saw coming. Not from Congress, not from the courts, not from protesters in the streets. This time, it comes from within Trump's own circle. A high-ranking official, one of the loyalists who had been at his side from the start, breaks ranks. On live television, in an interview that wasn't supposed to be explosive, they hesitate just a little too long. When asked if they support the latest executive action, the pause is deafening. And then, in a moment that no one expects, they say the one thing that shifts the ground beneath everyone's feet. I think we need to ask if this is still democracy. The words hit like a shockwave. The interview is cut short, but the damage is done. The White House scrambles. pushing back hard, calling the official a traitor, spinning the narrative as fast as possible. But the statement lingers. And now, the cracks that had been forming in the foundation widen just a little more. Meanwhile, in the streets, the divide sharpens. Protests grow, but so do counter-protests. The tension is no longer just political, it's personal. Families split over dinner table arguments. Friendships fracture under the weight of opposing beliefs. The question isn't just about Trump anymore, it's about the system itself. And then, late at night, another unexpected twist. A leaked document. A private memo from inside the administration, one that was never meant to see the light of day. It lays out a plan, strategic, detailed, ruthless. A plan to sidestep future obstacles, to make sure nothing stands in the way of executive power. It's not just about orders. It's about ensuring that checks and balances no longer apply in the way they once did. The memo spreads like wildfire. News outlets scramble to verify its authenticity. The White House denies it, calls it fake, insists that it's all a coordinated attack. But the words are out there now, and people can't unsee them. The debate shifts again. Now, it's no longer just about whether Trump's executive orders are too strong. It's about whether democracy itself is being rewritten in real time. Eddie Glaude knows what this means. He knows that this is the moment where history either bends back toward balance or breaks entirely. And as he watches the country react, as the battle over truth and power escalates, he knows one thing for certain. The final fight is about to begin. The country reaches a fever pitch. Every news channel runs the same footage. Massive crowds in the streets, lawmakers huddle behind closed doors, urgent voices analyzing every angle. The leaked memo has changed everything. It's no longer just a question of policy or even presidential power. Now it's a question of survival, of whether democracy, as the country knows it, can withstand this moment. Inside the White House, the mood is different, defiant, resilient. Trump dismisses the backlash as noise, a last-ditch effort by the establishment to stop him. His inner circle closes ranks, advisors whispering strategy, legal teams working around the clock to contain the damage. The message is clear. They won't back down. If anything, they will push harder. Then, a breaking development. Congress, after weeks of division, finally takes action. A rare bipartisan coalition emerges, not just the usual critics, but names that had, until now, stood firmly with the administration. There are closed-door meetings, hurried statements to the press, whispers of something bigger happening behind the scenes. And then an announcement. A formal challenge to the executive orders. Legal, political, unprecedented in scale. But just as the weight of government seems to be moving against Trump, another shock. A counter-move from the White House, bold, unexpected. A declaration that sidesteps Congress entirely, appealing directly to the public. Rallies are planned. A massive speech is scheduled. Supporters flood social media with messages of unwavering loyalty. The country splits even further, two sides locked in an all-or-nothing battle. The night of the speech arrives. The world watches. Trump takes the stage, flanked by towering American flags, the crowd roaring in approval. His voice is steady, his message clear. "They don't want me to lead," he says. "But I am here because of you, and I will not be stopped." The moment is electric. The divide is undeniable. And then, just as the speech reaches its peak, an interruption, a breaking news alert, another leak, another revelation. This time, it's not just a memo. It's proof. Documentation, recordings, evidence that the push for executive power was not just strategy, but a deliberate effort to erode the system itself. A step-by-step blueprint, undeniable, impossible to spin away. The impact is immediate. Silence spreads through the crowd, rippling outward. On live television, anchors scramble to make sense of it. Allies who had defended the administration moments ago hesitate, glancing at their phones, whispering among themselves. In Congress, lawmakers who had been waiting, unsure of their next move, now have what they need: The tipping point has arrived. In the White House, the walls close in. The legal challenges that have been delayed now move at full speed. Investigations deepen. Public confidence shifts. The administration, once untouchable, begins to fracture. Officials resign. Some turn against Trump, scrambling to distance themselves. Others double down, refusing to accept what's happening. And then, the final twist, something no one expected. In a move that stuns even his closest allies, Trump makes a last-ditch effort to maintain control. A direct appeal, a dramatic announcement, an attempt to reframe the entire crisis. But this time, the country doesn't react the same way. The foundation has already cracked. The momentum has shifted, and for the first time, the sense of inevitability that had surrounded his power begins to fade. Eddie Glaude watches, not with relief, but with a heavy awareness of what has just played out. This wasn't just about one president or one moment in time. It was about democracy itself, how fragile it is, how dangerously close it came to being reshaped beyond recognition. The battle may be over, but the lesson remains. History will remember this moment, but the real question, the one that lingers even after the dust settles, is whether the country will. The dust settles, but the air is still heavy. The country feels different now, as if it has been through something it doesn't quite know how to process. The final unraveling of Trump's unchecked power didn't happen in a single moment. It was slow, piece by piece, a shift that felt inevitable only in hindsight. The executive orders that once seemed untouchable are now tangled in legal battles, challenged, rewritten, or outright revoked. The administration, once so confident in its ability to bulldoze through obstacles, has been forced into retreat. Yet, even in the aftermath, the divide remains. For some, this was a victory, a sign that institutions held, that democracy, though shaken, endured. For others, it was proof of what they had believed all along, that the system was rigged, that the so-called resistance was never about democracy, but about keeping power out of the hands of those who threatened the status quo. The scars of this battle won't fade easily. They are written into families, friendships, workplaces, communities. The question of what comes next lingers like an unresolved chord. Meanwhile, Eddie Glaude continues to speak out, his voice cutting through the noise. He isn't just talking about Trump. He's talking about history, about how democracies are tested, about what happens when power becomes too concentrated. Some listen, nodding in agreement. Others dismiss his concerns, calling it alarmism. But Glaude knows that history doesn't repeat itself exactly, it rhymes. And right now, the echoes are impossible to ignore. Then, another executive order is signed. Another shift, another moment that leaves people wondering, where does this end? The question hangs in the air, unanswered. The tension builds, and somewhere in the heart of America, the future of democracy teeters on the edge. The weight of it all is starting to show. The country is on edge, caught in a storm of executive orders, political battles, and a deepening sense that something irreversible is happening. The streets are restless. Protests erupt in major cities, crowds gathering, voices raised, signs held high. Some are chanting in anger, demanding that the system fight back. Others rally in support, cheering for a leader who they believe is finally taking control. Inside the White House, the mood is defiant. Trump watches the chaos unfold on the news, a smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. He doesn't see panic. He sees proof that he's winning. They're mad because they can't stop me, he tells his advisors. The orders keep coming. The power keeps growing. And the institutions meant to check that power. They seem slower than ever, tangled in legal battles, political gridlock, and hesitation. Eddie Glaude knows that hesitation is dangerous. He's seen it in history books, in moments where democracies hesitated just long enough for power to slip away. He speaks with urgency now, appearing on news shows, writing op-eds, warning anyone who will listen. This is the moment, he says, his voice steady but intense. If we don't recognize what's happening right now, If we don't act, we may not have another chance. The courts scramble to respond. Lawsuits are filed. Legal challenges move forward. But the wheels of justice turn slowly, and the executive orders are already in motion. Every time a judge blocks one, another appears. Every time Congress pushes back, Trump pushes harder. The tension is everywhere. In Washington, where lawmakers debate behind closed doors, unsure how far they're willing to go. In small towns, where neighbors quietly wonder if the country they've known is changing into something unrecognizable. In newsrooms, where journalists rush to keep up, struggling to separate truth from chaos. Then something shifts. A new executive order drops, one that crosses a line that even some of Trump's supporters didn't expect. The reaction is instant. Furious debates explode across the country. The media goes into overdrive. Lawmakers who had stood by him begin to waver. "This isn't what we signed up for," one senator mutters, caught on a hot mic. Trump doesn't back down. If anything, he doubles down, calling his critics weak, insisting that he alone knows what's best. His supporters rally, defending him with fierce loyalty. His opponents mobilize, sensing that this moment is different, that this is the turning point. The pressure builds. Protests grow larger. Legal battles become fiercer. The division in the country feels deeper than ever. People hold their breath, waiting for what comes next, for the moment when everything will either break apart or be pulled back from the edge. Eddie Glaude watches it all with a heavy heart. He knows that history won't judge this moment by what was debated, but by what was done. And right now, the question that hangs in the air, the question that no one can yet answer, is the one that will define everything. What happens when a democracy reaches its breaking point? And then the breaking point arrives. And then the breaking point arrives. It happens faster than anyone expects. One moment, the country is teetering, waiting, holding its breath. The next, everything shifts. A new executive order, sweeping, bold, unlike anything before, lands like a lightning strike. It bypasses the usual channels, ignores legal challenges already in motion, and asserts presidential power in a way that leaves even political insiders stunned. The response is immediate. Furious debates erupt across news networks, social media explodes, and for the first time, there's a sense that this isn't just about policy anymore. It's about control. And then, just as the dust begins to settle from the shock of the latest order, something even more unexpected happens: an internal fracture. For the first time, signs of disagreement emerge from within the White House itself. Whispers of dissent leak out, sources hinting that not everyone in the president's inner circle supports the latest move. Some officials begin to distance themselves, their statements carefully worded, their silence speaking volumes. The pressure is mounting. The walls are closing in. And as the next chapter of this unfolding crisis looms, one question remains: what happens when power pushes too far, even for those who once embraced it? The answer is coming. And when it does, the entire country will feel its impact. And then, it all reaches a breaking point. The pressure, the resistance, the growing cracks in the system. It was only a matter of time before something gave way. The country holds its breath as the White House makes its next move, doubling down instead of backing off. The president dismisses the growing dissent within his own ranks, brushing off concerns from lawmakers, judges, even members of his own administration. His message is clear. Asterisk, this is not a negotiation. This is how things will be from now on. Asterisk. But something shifts. The opposition, once scattered and uncertain, finds a rallying point. The latest executive order becomes the moment that forces action, not just from the usual critics, but from unexpected places. Behind closed doors, conversations are happening that weren't possible before. Political allies who had once defended the administration now hesitate. Some break their silence. The legal system, slow but relentless, starts to catch up. A lawsuit challenging the latest order moves faster than anyone anticipated, and for the first time, the courts issue a ruling that directly halts one of the president's key actions. The response is immediate and explosive. The White House lashes out, calling the decision a politically motivated attack. Supporters of the president flood social media, calling on him to fight back, while opponents see it as a turning point. Protests reach a fever pitch, and the country teeters on the edge of something unpredictable. But then, just when it seems like the standoff will only escalate further, the final twist comes. Late into the night, reports begin to surface. Key officials inside the administration have resigned. Some leave quietly, others with statements that send shockwaves through the political world. One, a high-ranking insider who had stood by the president through every controversy, delivers a statement that no one sees coming. Asterisk can no longer support what is happening. This is not what I signed up for. Asterisk. The impact is immediate. Doubt spreads. The president, once surrounded by unwavering loyalty, now stands more isolated than ever. And then, in a moment that no one could have predicted, the president himself makes a move that changes everything. He steps in front of the cameras, expression unreadable, and delivers a statement that leaves the country stunned. Asterisk, this isn't over. But things are about to change. Asterisk. What that means, no one knows for sure. But one thing is clear. The power struggle that has shaken the nation is reaching its next chapter. The battle isn't finished. The rules of the game have already shifted, and what comes next may be even more unpredictable than anyone ever imagined. The country stands still, waiting for what comes next. The president's words, asterisk, things are about to change, asterisk, hang in the air, leaving everyone grasping for answers. The power struggle that has defined this era isn't ending with a dramatic overthrow or a sudden shift in leadership. Instead, it's something more uncertain, more complicated. The battle for control isn't over, but the rules of engagement have shifted. In the days that follow, the cracks within the administration widen. More officials resign, some stepping forward with stories about how the limits of power were tested behind closed doors. Congress, once divided and hesitant, finds renewed urgency. The courts continue their fight, pushing back on executive overreach, reinforcing that the system is still holding, just barely. But the scars remain. The deep divide in the country is still there, the arguments still raging. Trust in the system, in leadership, in democracy itself, has been shaken in ways that won't be easily repaired. Eddie Glaude's words echo once again. Asterisk, this isn't just about one president. It's about what happens when power is stretched too far, when institutions are tested, when democracy itself is put under pressure. Asterisk, he reminds everyone that this moment isn't the end of the story. It's just another chapter in a long and complicated struggle over what kind of country America wants to be.